Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So today we're building something that I've been wanting to build for a very long time now, which is a very huge modern mansion on top of a mountain. And I just felt like Granite Falls was the perfect location to build this sort of building, mainly because the entire environment is sort of made up by like mountains and rocks, and there's also like a lot of these like really tall sort of forest trees that I just feel like look really well. So yeah, I just wanted to create something that sort of like blended in, that was sort of like built on top of this mountain, if that makes sense. And I started by placing some rocks that were similar to the environment around the entire lot, just to like get an idea of like how big I wanted the entire house to be, and sort of like give it a foundation to like sort of work on, if that makes sense. And I really like the idea of having the swimming pool sort of like overlook the entire like environment. I really liked how below the swimming pool there wasn't a lot of like rock supporting, if that makes sense, but rather like on either side. And I just felt like that really added to making the build look a bit more interesting rather than like overfilling with too many rocks, if that makes sense. And we also do utilize quite a few rounded walls throughout the entire build, mainly because I just really like the way they look, especially with how modern it actually makes the entire build feel overall, in my opinion. But I did try to like use it as little as possible, mainly because we know that there are quite a few issues with them. And as I was creating this build, I was obviously using the second floor as like the main floor, if that makes sense. So I wasn't using the first floor, which has the foundation, because I wanted the entire build to sort of hover over these rocks as if it was like sitting on it, rather than having walls that went all the way down towards like the bottom of the lot, which I felt like just wouldn't really look that realistic. But I did try to fake different levels of the entire home just by like raising and lowering some floor pieces here and there, just to make it look a bit more dynamic than it really is. And we also have like the first floor on the same level as the swimming pool, which I feel like makes the build overall look a bit more interesting, just like adding some different like height and variation to the entire build overall, which we will definitely see a lot more of later on in the video. But so far we're just going around the entire exterior and just sort of like adding to it, such as like adding some extra rooms or like floors, while also adding all the necessary windows just to get like a lot of natural lighting, and especially on that third floor, which has so many windows going around like the entire room, which I just feel like looks really nice in my opinion, especially like with this height up on top of like the mounting. And I also wanted to add some like nice detail onto those windows by adding some shelving units going throughout like the entire sort of like top part of that window, just to make it look a bit more interesting, especially because we're using the tallest wall height on that third floor. So I just wanted to make it look as interesting as possible by adding some details. I wanted to turn the swimming pool into one of those infinity pools, and the way I did that was just by adding windows on the side of like the pool walls. And I also wanted to add some extra details to the swimming pool, such as like one of those like water catchers or like these gutters that you see in these big swimming pools. And I did that just by placing some pristine pedestals around like the perimeter of the swimming pool. And I also went around the entire exterior and just added some extra rocks here and there just to make it look a bit more realistic. And I didn't want to have any like open bits or gaps, so your Sims would have to walk through the rocks in order to get into the house, which works completely fine. This entire build is completely functional, and I just really like the way that actually works, in my opinion. But yeah, moving on to the actual interior, where we're starting to create the actual like floor plan, and I didn't really have a lot of space for every single like floor, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was just trying to make something that looked really interesting but also felt like a really big open floor plan, if that makes sense. I was also trying to create as many rooms as possible, mainly because although it is a relatively huge house, there is not really that much space, in my opinion. The first floor does have quite a lot of space, however I didn't really utilize all of it. So if you guys are planning to play in this build, you guys can definitely go and just like add whatever you guys want into that bottom area that I sort of like left blank, and you guys would see it will be a little bit more obvious later on like what parts I sort of like left blank, because I didn't leave a lot of it, but I just left part of it where I just felt like it wasn't really necessary to add anything to, in my opinion. But I just felt like this house was really big enough, especially with how it had 3 floors. But yeah, I just tried to go around the entire exterior and just add some like balconies or just like extra floor here and there just to make it look a bit more interesting. And I sort of went with this very nice eco lifestyle wooden floor texture, because I just really like the way it looks. And if you guys have seen my previous videos, you guys would know that that is one of my favorite floorings to use, mainly because it just looks super realistic. And I really do like the concrete walls that come from eco lifestyle as well, so you guys will definitely be seeing that texture throughout the entire build as well. And so far you guys can get like a little glimpse of what the floor plan sort of looks like. Try to make the build as interesting as possible while keeping it like a very huge open floor plan, which is sort of like difficult to do, especially because like a lot of these like open floor plans don't have a lot of like small rooms and stuff like that, so you can't really, you know, divide a lot of like rooms and sections. But I just feel like I really did like the end result of this entire build overall. And you guys can see like how this sort of like system works, where we have these rocks that sort of cover the entire stairway, but I can assure you that all of that is completely functional. You wouldn't have any issues when playing in this build. But yeah, I just sort of like use the right hand side of the actual house rather than using the other left hand side of the house when it came to the first floor, mainly because I just felt like there was just too much space and I just didn't want to utilize every single part of it, especially because there was like some rocks and stuff poking out here and there, and I just didn't want to adjust too much of the exterior because I was liking how it looked. But so far we have a very nice open looking living space, especially with those very nice glass sliding doors, which also has a very nice balcony on the outside that your Sims can go into, which I feel like looks really nice. But so far we're focusing on that very small kitchen that I decided to create on the first floor, which I went with like a very simple color scheme. I went with like an all white, but then I do end up eventually changing it, mainly because I just felt like the white looked a bit too simple and it just blended in a bit too much with the wallpaper, which was already fully white, and I just felt like it looked a bit more interesting by adding some more colors into it. And I just felt like this looked a lot more nicer, and I don't really use the Home Chef Hustle kitchen set that often, so I just felt like it was a nice change for me as well to use it in this build as well. But we do also have another kitchen upstairs, which we'll see later on in the video, and I wanted to incorporate a small little like bar area, so I just created like these two small like bar counter seats, which I felt like looked pretty nice and added on to the kitchen and made it look a bit more interesting in my opinion. But yeah, we do also have a very nice sort of like dining space area off to this like big empty side area, which I feel like looks really nice. And I tried to change the colors of the seats just to make it look a bit more interesting, because I just feel like so far I've been doing that quite a lot recently by changing certain like parts of like the seating just to make it look a bit more interesting, and I just feel like it does add a bit more detail to the overall like build, if that makes sense. And we do also have a very small little office space on this first floor as well, and I really do actually like the way it looks. However, there is no windows or anything, so unfortunately it's not really getting any natural light, so I sort of had to make it look as nice as possible with like adding artificial light, whether it was from the shelving or if it was like a pendant light. But I did add one of my favorite wallpapers, which is one of those wainscoted ones, and I just really like the way it looks because I just feel like it makes any room look really formal in my opinion, and kind of like elegant, if that makes sense. And I kind of went with a black and white color scheme, which I kind of do for most of my builds, mainly because I just feel like it looks really interesting for me, I guess. I just feel like the colors do look nice, but I just really like the black and white sort of like style overall in my opinion. I just feel like that's kind of just like more my taste, and you guys will definitely be seeing a lot of black and white throughout this entire build, so I do apologize if you guys do like adding a lot of color to your builds. I just kind of like making it look a bit more neutral and modern, if that makes sense. But yeah, moving on to the second floor, which is the main floor of this entire home. We're actually starting off by creating a very nice kitchen in like sort of this like center area of the entire home, and we're actually using the Dream Home Decorator counters, but we're also using the island living counters. So if you guys have not seen my previous builds, I've always been doing this sort of like style by like blending those two cabinets together. So I would be using the island living sort of like island counters because I really like the waterfall edge that you get with those counters, but I also really like how simple the Dream Home Decorator cabinets look and counters, so I do like using those for like the main area of the kitchen, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just sort of like added some extra details and stuff like that here and there, and I really like this sort of like air vent unit, but I didn't want it to be really tall, so I just used a tool mod just to like adjust it to like the perfect position of like where I wanted it to be. And I just made like some sort of like designated like coffee area off to the side, which I feel like looked really nice as well. And it's kind of like something that I've been doing quite a lot in my recent builds, and I just really like the way it looks. And I just added some like extra clutter here and there, such as like some plants, a cookbook, and some like fruits in a bowl, just to make it look a bit more like lived in and realistic. We're starting off with the second living room space, and I just feel like this one looks a bit more like comfortable to be in, if that makes sense, mainly because you just have like a very nice huge sort of like U-shaped sort of couch that you could just like relax on. And I sort of like faked this nice modern coffee table by using one of those Dream Home Decorator coffee tables while while also using like one of those stone slabs that came from Spa Day, which I really do like utilizing for my living room coffee tables. I just feel like it makes it look really realistic but also really modern. And I also used the Dream Home Decorator kitchen cabinets for like the wall units as like those TV sort of like floating TV units, if that makes sense. And I really like the way I utilize the lighting on this side of the room, mainly because I kind of had to focus on how I can create some extra artificial light, because we didn't have a lot of windows on that side of the room, unfortunately, because it was kind of like covered by the rocks and stuff. So this was one of the bedrooms that we had on the second floor, which is relatively small. This is, I believe, the smallest one that we have so far, but it does have all of the necessities, such as like its own ensuite, it's like whole own like desk and stuff like that, as well as like its own wardrobe. So I feel like there's not really that big, it's not really that big of an issue. But we also have this very interesting layout for this bedroom. So we have a circular bedroom, and I did it really nice. And especially since the circular room is relatively huge, I'm not really sure what I should like really add into it. I did add pretty much everything into it, but it still felt like a little bit empty. So I just went around and added some extra seating area, as well as like some bookshelves, just trying to make it look as interesting and lived in as possible. And I also added some nice seating towards like one side of the circular room where there's like a lot of windows which you can look out of, which I feel like looks really nice. And I actually pasted that room above it because it was the exact same shape, and I wanted to keep that sort of like design, if that makes sense. But I did actually end up changing pretty much every single item inside of this third room. It's because I didn't want it to be an exact replica, but rather have like the same sort of like layout. So having like this bed in the same location, the windows and whatnot, but just a few of the furniture items are like in different positions or in like different styles, if that makes sense. So here we're actually able to use a Dream Home Decorator walk-in wardrobe sort of modular pieces, because I have more space and I was able to remove one of the windows, whereas the one downstairs does not really have that much space for it, if that makes sense. And the color scheme is completely different as well for both rooms, so it will be easily like identifiable, so you wouldn't really like get confused if you're on the first or second floor. But on the third floor we also have our third living room. So I wanted to keep this relatively like open, and I didn't want to keep it like really boxy or like closed off and like create a lot of like bedrooms and stuff like that, mainly because this was sort of like an entertainer's mansion and I didn't want to like close it off too much. So I wanted to have as much entertainment as possible. So what I did for the third floor was by creating this like very huge sort of like glassed room. And obviously, since we have so many windows all around, I didn't want to like close it off too much. So I went with this very nice open floor plan sort of entertainment style room. And on one side we have a very nice open living space, whereas on the other side we have a more sort of bar area where you can actually just like sit down and like drink. And we also placed a piano there just to like add some extra decor to the area. And on this floor we do also have extra sort of like seating, as well as like a barbecue area outdoors, so your Sims can actually go outside and have a barbecue, or if they want to sit outside or whatnot, they can also explore and like go out onto that sort of like big balcony roof area, which I feel like is really cool. I didn't zone it off or like close it off with any sort of like railing or whatnot, because I didn't feel like it looked really that good or was necessary, especially since like your Sims aren't going to fall off. So I just feel like keeping it empty like that, and I just feel like it looks really interesting, and it also looks really cool in my opinion. And this is another one of the bedrooms that we have, and this is actually on the second floor, and I really love the way this bedroom turned out, to be honest. It kind of reminds me of the bedroom from my huge like Sulani mansion that I built a few weeks ago, and I just really like the way it looks, to be honest, especially with like the windows that look out into those like scenic views and stuff. And I tried to create a nice simple like living space here. I wanted to make it look as nice as possible with like the color schemes that I've chosen and stuff like that. I didn't want to keep it too black and white, so I wanted to incorporate some nice natural wood tones, some like very muted blue tones as well. And yeah, just like trying to keep it like a mutual but also like very simplistic sort of like style for the entire room. And that room also has its own walk-in wardrobe as well as its own ensuite. However, I didn't want to show it just because I don't want to waste your guys' time, but you guys can see here as well, as we're building the gym and the art room, you guys would see a few bits of it, but it will also be available in the tour if you guys do plan to stick around towards the end. But yeah, moving on to the actual like gym area, we didn't really spend too much time in it, mainly because it's not really that interesting. I just kept like the necessary items in there, and I just sort of just like added some different like accent wallpapers, as well as like the dumbbells that came from the new Love Struck expansion pack, and just like pretty much that was it. And now we're moving on to the art room, which I've recently done quite a lot. in most of my builds recently, and I just really enjoyed doing it, and I feel like it looks really good. And then I went back and just added some clutter pieces here and there throughout like every single room just to make it and feel a bit more like lived in and realistic. And I went back to the exterior and just added some extra greenery and stuff here and there throughout the rocks to make it look a bit more realistic. Yeah, that seems to be pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing and commenting your suggestions and thoughts in the comment sections below. I would love to know what you guys think. And I also have a tour towards the end of the video, so make sure to stick around for that. And I do also have a bunch more other videos similar to this if you guys are interested in these sort of videos on the channel. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video.